and happy Friday, YouTube family. Welcome to Friday Morning Financials with Nina, where I break down key money management tips to help you achieve your financial goals. I'm your host, Nina. Last week, we started building the main floor of our financial house with a budget, part one. Today, we are continuing with finishing the budget in part two. All right, grab your tea, sit back, and let's get financially savvy. And as always, don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment if you enjoy the show. If you have questions on this episode, feel free to drop them in the comments as well. Then tune in for the next episode to hear me address your question. Now let's get started. After watching last week's episode, A Budget Part 1, you should now have a solid plan for your budget based on your needs for living, your wants, as well as your savings. So you should have a good allocation of, okay, now I see that my needs, for example, is at 50% of my income, or my savings is at 20% of my income, and my wants are technically at 30% of my income. You should now be able to have that information in front of you to evaluate whether or not your budget actually lines up. So, this is a next important step after you create your budget to check in and see, does it actually line up with the 50% of your income being spent on your needs? Does it align with the 30% of your monthly income being spent and allocated to your wants? And then lastly, are you saving 20% of your monthly income? How does that measure up? So we're going to look into that a little bit more again. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to tweak your budget so that you can get to the actual 50-30-20 rule. So the goal is 50% for your needs. And let's just say today you're at 60. I have been here. So when I first started this budget, I was not at 50. I was over. I was probably at 65%. So 65% of my income was going towards my needs. Now, we have to reduce that, right? And you could try to, we know the goal is 50, but if life is happening and situations are happening where you said, hey, I really can't get to 50 right now, I'm going to strive for 60 or 55. If you have to make some adjustments to your goal, it is all good. It's really a part of the process to get the budget working in your favor and get into habits that will get you to live within your means. So it's really simple, guys. If you focus on living within your means, and I think that this budget, this 50-30-20, really helps you do that. Because if you start going over, then you're sacrificing in your savings category, and then you're also sacrificing in the living in the now category. So it just helps you stay in line to be realistic. Again, when I first started, I was probably at 65%. So you definitely can work your way down. How do you work your way down? Okay. So we're at 60 today. We really need to get to 50. What do? We start looking at the expenses that you can change Mortgage, rent. Can you move? Can you get a refinance? Can you talk to someone about lowering your mortgage, coming up with a plan? That can be an option. Now, that may be a more challenging approach, but it is an approach that you can make to try and reduce some expenses, things that you cannot change. And I'm just going through utilities, water, gas. Those aren't things that you can change. And I would also say a car note. Difficult to change, but you can change that. Insurance, homeowners insurance, renters insurance. You can always go shopping and try to reduce that insurance. And some of you may be thinking, why is insurance in the monthly budget? Because some of you may pay your insurances annually. I personally do pay my insurances annually. Most times you will get a discount for doing so, so I try to take advantage of that. What do I do? My insurance is incorporated in my monthly budget. So I take the annual expected expense for that insurance and I pay myself. I set aside the money specifically for my insurances to make sure that when I get to the end of the year, when that payment is due, I am able to pay the full annual amount. Okay. But again, you can shop for insurances if you think that you can get a better rate on your insurance. And again, some companies they offer if you pay annually a benefit. So if you put that in your budget, you will be able to take advantage of the discount for paying annually. So those are some things I'm just trying to think of needs offhand. Your phone, your cell phone. Can you get a lower rate on your cell phone bill? Definitely an option, and that's probably one of the easier options. I would say cell phone insurance. Those are more of the easier options. Car note and mortgage and rent a little bit more difficult, but definitely possible for reducing expenses. Landline. Do you have a landline that you do not need? Are you considering cable a need? Is it truly a need when you have Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime? Is it truly a need? Is Amazon Prime a need or is that a want? You really have to do some digging to say, how can I reduce these expenses if I'm over the 50%? Okay? Um Anything else? So we're talking about, I'm just thinking here, we're talking about utilities, probably something that you cannot change. Food, gas. We are always seeing gas prices go up and down. So that is something that we really have no control over, but need to ensure that we have the money allocated for. Now, one thing that I can say is that, again, upfront, because I did speak on this in part one. Up front, you're going to be putting in some work to make sure that you have a solid budget. That work is going to be well worth it. Okay. So if you start looking at over the past 2-3 months, what those bills look like, you can make sure that you take an average or like a worst case. I always say to the people that I talk to and the people that I coach, make sure that you take the worst case scenario. So, for example, when you are evaluating your needs, and again, you're trying to get to this 50%, if your utilities between the gas and electric is $400 every month, make sure that you allocate $400 every month as a worst case. But then if it's between seasons and you're able to turn the air conditioning off, you're not going to spend $400. You're going to have some extra amount. So, and then that extra amount from what you had anticipated can be used to go into your savings fund. And then you automatically get some extra income just because you haven't used that dedicated $400. That is a quick and easy way. Again, if you so happen to be under what you had allocated in your budget, as a quick savings win for you. Okay, now let's clear that out. So we talked about the 50%. What about the 30%? The 30% of wants. How much are you spending on entertainment, going out to eat, concerts, memberships, coffee club, gym club, volleyball league, all of those things, even for the kids, toys, clothes. And I talked about this as well in part one. Depending on what phase you are in life, your wants, or your needs rather, could become wants. So you always have to reevaluate. At if you're fresh into the corporate world, you may definitely need a clothing budget for your job. But if you are more seasoned professional, you may not need that. So just evaluate and make adjustments. But your wants, I would say, and I've said this as well, the 30% is a lot. In my mind, that's a lot. Okay? So if you had $1,000 and you allocated 30% to your wants, that is $300. $300 out of your 1,000 you are spending on entertainment, eating out. For one person, I think that's a lot. If you're saying 2,000 for two people, you're talking about 600. I still think that's a lot. But again, it depends on your lifestyle. How much do you spend on clothes? How much do you spend going out? Are you spending money on dates? Do you not cook and go out to eat? I always encourage people to start at the 30%, but if you can get less then 30%. If you can get less, more like 20. If you can get 20 on your wants, then I think you will be in better shape in the long run. And I'll tell you why. Because you'll have more to allocate to your savings, which ultimately is going to get you to be able to achieve your short term and long term savings goals, which is ultimately going to make you happy. So the monthly wants budget allocation is for short-term gratification and getting through those busy work weeks and enjoying the weekend, because I do not believe that you are on this earth to live to work. I believe that work is a support for living. So I do not live and thrive to work. I work so that I can support the lifestyle that I would like to live. That is my philosophy. So if you make somewhat of a sacrifice now, then you'll be able to reap those gratifications, um or reap those benefits and have more gratifications in the long run. So once, if you are over the 30%, I would say immediately get rid of gym membership, get rid of reducing your entertainment budget. Sometimes it's okay to say no. Come up with alternatives. So I like to have virtual girls nights. That's one thing that I do to connect with my friends. But just be creative. I mean, you can go to the park, you can walk, you can go to the tennis courts. You can take advantage of community events that are free for entertainment. You can trade off with friends or family to host a game night or a gathering. There's all sorts of ways to uh, try and entertain yourself and enjoy life and socialize without breaking the bank or your budget. So, again, I would say if you're at the 30%, awesome. But if you can get to 20%, you will be your future self will thank you. I'll say that. You'll just be in a better spot. And that depends on if you have big long-term financial goals. Okay? Because if you start saying that you want to save up for a car in this day and age, you're probably talking about a decent car, 35 to 40,000, and I think that is stretching a little bit if you're talking about a new car. So expenses like that add up, and realistically you have to save up a little bit at a time in order to support those goals. So the more money that you can free up, the better off you will be in order to gradually start supporting those goals. Now, we went through the wants. What about our 20% in savings? If you are meeting your 50% for your needs and you are not saving 20% of your monthly income, that tells me the other part is coming from your 30% um of your wants. So you might be spending more than 30% on your wants. You have to watch that. So saving 20% is important. This does not, again, include 401k. The 401k is separate. But you have to start thinking about, in the savings category, what are your short-term and long-term goals? What are they really? That's when you start making your overall goals. Is it, I want to travel? You're going to need a travel fund. Is it, I would like to get my master's degree? Education fund. And honestly, there is always a need for a car, right? So a car fund. Maybe you don't want to buy a house. Maybe you prefer to rent. You might not need a home fund. So, you think about your short term and long term goals. Is I mean, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't even put jewelry or clothes in here because that's covered by your wants. And the travel could be too. What about early retirement, or fire as some folks call it? If that is a long-term goal for you, that is where this 20% of savings should be allocated in terms of funds. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Friday Morning Financials with Nina. I hope you found today's discussion on the main floor of your financial house, a budget part 2, insightful and inspiring. Remember, financial freedom is within your reach, and every small step you take brings you closer to your goals. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends and family. Your support helps me continue to bring you valuable financial insights each and every week. And don't forget to check out the rest of my YouTube channel, Endless Fridays, where we also share travel tips and inspiration to help you live each and every day like it is Friday. Don't forget to tune in next week at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for our next episode of Debt Payoff. It's an episode that you will not want to miss. Until then, stay financially savvy and have a fantastic weekend. Okay, I gotta pause that.